So, welcome to our podcast series, Coaching Outdoors. I'm Anna-Marie. I'm joined with my co-host Alex and our amazing outdoor coach guest for today, who is Jacqueline Harris.
So, hi Jacqueline, it's lovely to meet you. Would you introduce yourself to our podcast listeners, please?
Yes, so I'm Jacqueline Harris. My business is Breath of Fresh Air, and I'm an executive coach and trainer and facilitator who helps people and business to realise their potential and love working outdoors as well as some of the work that I do indoors.
And can you just give us an idea of whereabouts you are today? Because you're lucky enough to actually be outdoors. Unfortunately, Anna-Marie and I can't be outdoors because the weather isn't allowing it for technology reasons. But it's lovely to see you outdoors. So could you let us know whereabouts you are?
Yes, well, you can see it's a bit chilly today. I'm all wrapped up. And I play at a place called Dinton Pastures near Wokingham, which is a place where I do a lot of my outdoor coaching, and I call it my outdoor office.
Mm-hmm. We were just saying, actually, before we actually started the podcast, we were having a chat. I actually know Dinton Pastures very well myself. I used to live just around the corner as well, and I used to spend a lot of my childhood, most summers, when I wasn't away on holiday down south in Cornwall. I used to spend a lot of my summers in Dinton Pastures playing in the water. So it's an absolutely beautiful place to be. So anybody who lives in or near the Wokingham or Reading area, highly recommend popping along to Dinton Pastures if you haven't been before, even just for a walk, but definitely for some outdoor coaching. I think it's a wonderful place to do it.
It is.
So Jacqueline, could you let us know a little bit about what your first memory is of being outdoors and why you enjoy the outdoors so much yourself?
Well, I guess in terms of first memory of being outdoors, there are two elements to it. One is just I remember as a child, particularly summer holidays, but it's just spending all day outdoors, whether it was in the garden or going on adventures with some of the other children, and just spending, just loving spending all the time outdoors. But then also summer holidays actually on the beach, where we'd be on the beach from dawn till dusk if we could, and really, getting involved in coaching outdoors was something that I started about 16 years ago, and I hadn't realised how much I loved outdoors until then. I'd loved gardening and being in nature, but I hadn't been a real outdoor person. I didn't grow up in that way.
And this is what we're finding when we're talking to coaches. It's really interesting to kind of discover the affinities that people have for the outdoors. And for you, it seems to be the kind of like a slightly later realization, and then kind of bringing it into your kind of coaching, into your work. So it'd be really interesting just to kind of link it to how you kind of, your coaching career, how it then kind of intertwined with the outdoor space, and then what kind of, specifically triggered you to actually step outdoors and work within, your outdoor office, as you call it.
Yes, well, I've been coaching officially for about 25 years now as my job, but I realised that I was coaching for many years before that anyway, in my previous career. Just always loved helping to develop people. But kind of discovering the outdoors came, as I said, about 16 years ago in terms of coaching, as I was doing my my first NLP training. And I'd always been interested as well in accelerated learning and the learning environment. And I started thinking about the whole multisensory experience and how that could enhance coaching and generally learning. And while I was on this training, which was amazing, I felt inspired one day on my way home, because I'd been thinking about this. What could I do with the outdoors? And I just felt inspired. I pulled over, I found this footpath, and I just felt I needed to go for a walk to think it all through. And I just found myself walking through the countryside, something which I'd never done on my own before. And just this inspiration came to me, this vision of how I could help using the outdoors. I could use it to help so many people, and that influence could kind of go on and on for generations to come. And it would be so powerful. And that's when the idea came to me. And then I just started working on it and trying it out and seeing how I could work with it.
And just to kind of follow up with that, because clearly you had kind of quite a lot of experience working as a coach already. So then kind of making that shift from kind of like indoor to outdoor, what kind of changed during that? What did you notice in yourself and in your clients?
It was just kind of just a fascinating transition, because I actually started working with groups rather than individuals when I first started coaching outdoors. So it was finding a way in which to bring groups out and do some group coaching. And I just noticed how much those people could learn, could change, could develop, how they would open up so much in terms of the way they would talk to each other and in their thinking. And then I started to transfer that to the one-to-one coaching. And yes, just such a dynamic change actually in the whole feeling of it over that time.
And it's really interesting you just introduced the concept of feelings there. We're really interested to know actually how outdoor coaching sessions make you feel, and also from the feedback you've had from your coachees. How does being outdoors and having those coaching conversations outdoors, how does that make your coachees feel?
Well, I when I'm outdoors coaching and well, just generally I'm outdoors, I just find it so invigorating and energizing to be outdoors. It's at the same time as being relaxing, which I think is kind of one of those combinations that we bring in the coaching. So I think the same thing I find that the people that I'm coaching feel. Many of them arrive really quite stressed. And I can tell as we start walking, their pace is really kind of quite fast, and gradually they start to slow down a bit as they start to relax, but it's relaxed in an energized way. And that then affects how their thoughts about everything that we're talking about.
It's really interesting you mentioned about pace, because some of the anecdotal feedback we've had, and also some research as well, really does highlight the difference between sort of indoor coaching and outdoor coaching, in that when you're outdoors, you can move, and yes, I suppose you can move around indoors a bit, but the being outdoors enables that ability to move and use pace as part of the conversation. How do you find that pace changing throughout a conversation? Are there times when people speed up or slow down? Have you noticed any differences in pace?
Yes, aside from what I've just said about how people tend to slow down a bit as we get into the coaching, absolutely, in terms of what we're talking about, in terms of how they're feeling and how they're thinking, we can either speed up or slow down. And also, in terms of the pace of the coaching, sometimes we will pull over like this to the side of the lake because it is right just to stay still for a while as well. And that just adds different dynamics to the coaching, which is interesting. I also, one of the things for me, which I'm fascinated by, is, of course, different people have different paces, and to see what somebody's natural pace is like. And that in itself can be some feedback to the person that I'm coaching, in terms of, do they recognize the kind of pace that they're at, and how natural is that for them, or is it a learned behavior that they feel they need to be at that pace?
Yeah, really interesting.
And it's like the way that we move through the environment, the world, and how we kind of place ourselves in it is one part of it. But kind of being outdoors is often talked about as being like a really multi-sensory experience.
Yes.
So it's almost, okay, so beyond movement, kind of what part do you see the other senses kind of taking place? Whether it's a smell, whether it's a taste, touch, sound, and sight. What have you noticed in your coaching that kind of is based on that? Well,
it's just complete multisensory immersion. I would say that the strongest ones, one, of course, well, I don't know, it depends on the individual, of course, but the movement as it is part of the kinesthetic in terms of how people feel, but the visual is so important as well, and the views and how we use the visual senses during the coaching. Using a lot of metaphor from what we draw from the surroundings is very important, and again adds to the whole coaching dialogue. And talking about dialogue, very auditory, lots of sounds. In two dimensions, probably, I think that you've got the sounds that are happening around us at the moment. I can hear some birds and some rustling in the trees. But there's also actually, I think, that particularly walking and coaching when you're side by side, I think the auditory in terms of the talking is accentuated in a way because we're not looking at each other directly in the eyes. So we're listening attentively to each other.
And Jacqueline, you've brought up something that's really kind of come out in this small amount of research that's actually been done into the benefits of outdoor coaching, and it is that thing about being side by side, which again is really kind of differentiates between the kind of indoor world of coaching and the outdoor world of coaching, and whether you're sitting side by side or walking side by side, there's that, as you mentioned, which is brilliant there, that idea of you're not looking at each other. What do you think the sort of outdoor coaching conversation does to enable a coachee to think differently then? So you've mentioned lots of things there around senses and feelings and etc. When you sort of boil it down, what is it do you think about being outdoors that really does enable people to think differently?
I think the biggest thing for me is space. It's you get people out of the four walls, which can constrain their thinking. And you get them outside, particularly where they can see the sky or a beautiful view, and it releases their thinking. They can think more widely, think more differently, as well as a change of location, I think. So there's the change, but particularly the space, as well as the walking, the movement affects the brainwaves in terms of we get into this relaxed but energized brainwave pattern that can be very different to when we're actually fixed, static, or at a stress level. So that can affect the thinking.
And bringing it into kind of a slightly different area now, and moving in, kind of focusing on you as the coach, and within your training, within your experience. What would you say the top 3 coaching skills are for ultimately coaching outdoors?
Well, yes, of course, you've already got the layer of coaching skills that you need. Probably outdoors, I think listening is important for any coaching, but I think even more so listening attentively outdoors, particularly as I rarely make notes. I carry a little notebook with me if there are particular words or things that we need to capture, and we'll stop and capture those. But I'm not making notes in the same way as I might do when I'm coaching indoors. So I really have to pay attention to the words that the other person is saying. So listening attentively, I think being present in the moment, being present in the space for the person that we're coaching. Again, it's important for any coaching, but I think outdoors, you're there for the person, and it's about being present in this environment as well to think, how can we make the most of this? Which kind of links to, I think, the third thing is about flexibility and adaptability, because again, being outdoors, lots of different things happen. We come across lots of different things that can add to the coaching. But also some challenges, you might have people passing by or dogs or anything like that, and we have to be able to flex to what's going on. So I think those are my 3.
Okay, thank you for sharing. And that last one as well, as soon as you enter, as soon as you step outdoors beyond 4 walls, it's a very dynamic environment, and how you interact with nature in whatever context, whether that is in a park where you are or kind of further afield in the wilds of Scotland up the mountain. It is very much having that flexibility and being able to respond, not just with being flexible within the coaching conversation, flexible with your environment, and making sure that you're managing risk as well at the same time, which kind of simultaneously, it takes a level of being able to kind of bounce between the two and ultimately remain present as well.
It's really interesting that you brought up the concept or the idea of note-taking as well, because I've actually had a couple of conversations just this year with people about, literally saying to me, when you coach outdoors, what do you do about note-taking? Because I think, especially when you're learning to be a coach and you're doing whatever qualification you're doing, even if they're not teaching you to take notes, there's kind of almost an unwritten rule that as you're coaching, you're making notes as you're going along, or at the end of the session. And a lot of coaches, I think, find it quite scary that they're not able to make notes as they're going along, or do they stop and make notes whilst they're walking and talking? So how can you what would you say to those kind of coaches to sort of allay their fears about not being able to make notes as you're going along?
I think it's actually to trust yourself that you will notice and you will remember. And one of the techniques I choose is to repeat back if there are any keywords that come out. So I think it is just to trust that. I think almost the fact that I have a notebook in my pocket is just a safety measure. And so it's trust it and have a go and practice. And you'll be amazed at how much you can remember.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? As you said, it's kind of having it's there if you need it, but you actually probably work out quite quickly that you actually don't need to be making those notes as you're going along.
Yes.
And I think for the coach as well, your own brain is being, you're accessing your own brain differently when you're walking and talking as well. And you are able, I think, to remember things better when you're walking as well. So what sort of top tips would you share with a coach who would like to experiment with outdoor coaching and try it for the first time if they've not done it before? What tips would you recommend for them?
But the first thing is to have a go. Find some, maybe fellow coaches, maybe some friends, maybe a client that you've worked with a lot before, and just say, let's have a go. Let me practice, because I think that's the key thing. Because I can't underestimate the amount of multitasking you do, and it becomes natural eventually. So I would just say practice, have a go, and find a few locations that you can get familiar with and that you can know, because it really helps if you know your route. I have, and I do coach in places that I've never been to before, but that adds another dimension to the coaching of me not knowing physically where I'm going. And I have to think about that. Whereas if it's a place that you're familiar with, it's much more helpful. So just try out different places and try out with different people.
And that's the whole point of this podcast, is to encourage kind of coaches to kind of take the plunge. So it's always encouraging when the top tip is like, yes, go and have a go. Do your research, do your preparation, do your planning, and then find someone who you're comfortable with, that you trust, and to go out and test it out. Because ultimately it is about taking that kind of step. Until you've had that experience yourself, you can read all about it, you can kind of listen all about it, but actually until you kind of go and have a go yourself, nothing's really going to change. So with kind of encouraging people to step outside, what resources would you recommend for people to dip into? And clearly we'd love to know where our listeners can find you.
Well, in terms of resources, I guess because I've just learned by doing, there are not many resources that I can say that I've particularly resorted to in terms of coaching outdoors. I know there's so many. I've just noticed in the last year so many new books being written about walking and the effect of walking. They're all on my reading list at the moment, so I can't recommend any particular ones, but there's lots of information out there. I guess in terms of one of the resources I would highly recommend, which I think is brilliant, is Alex's research that she's done and the summary of the research, which I think is a great document. So I would encourage everybody to have a look at that. But aside from that, you've got physical resources such as really good Ordnance Survey walking maps, for example, physical or online, looking for different locations for walking, and equipment, just in terms of having the right clothing, etc. But apart from that, yes, there's the resources I guess I would think about. Oh, and you mentioned about where can people find me?
Find you?
So the best place is my website, breathofreshair.uk.com, or look for me on LinkedIn. Jacqueline Harris, and on Twitter, Breath of Fresh.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline. We've come to the end of the questions we had for you, and I have to say it's been a wonderful podcast. You've covered so many wonderful topics, and to see you outdoors as well is absolutely brilliant
yes.
too. And just, you know, and again, just witnessing somebody being outdoors and having a conversation like we've been having, I think it does show, you know, you're outdoors. We could easily be having a coaching conversation either next, you know, side by side together, or like this virtually as well. So there is an element of being able to have those conversations virtually as well as in person as well. So have you had any experience doing virtual or phone outdoor coaching yourself?
I haven't. It's something I've been thinking about, or I'm going to say I haven't. Actually, I have had one of my clients when we first went into lockdown and we couldn't coach outside, who that person went for a walk while I coached while I was inside. At the time, I was more worried about actually if we navigating everybody else while I was outside and having to stay distant from everybody. But I think it's something that it will, you know, I will definitely think about going forward.
It's something I've played with over the last few months with restrictions in place. And I've been in one part of the wheelchair and my client has been in the other part of the wheelchair, and we've both been kind of ambling through the countryside. And it does. I mean, it's different again, so it does work. So yeah, have a go. Let us know how it goes for you.
I will do. Yes. Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you so much, Jacqueline. And as with all of our podcasts, you'll find them on our website, coaching-outdoors.com. And so, yes, all it takes is for us to say thank you so much, Jacqueline, and hopefully we will see you in person at some point soon.
Yes, look forward to it. Maybe to take a walk. Yes.
Absolutely. Next time I'm down in Reading, I will let you know, because I would love to go
definitely.
for a wander around Dinton Pastures with you. It'd be wonderful. So thank you so much, Jacqueline. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Lovely to see you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
So if you enjoyed what you've heard,
like it,
share across your network,
and subscribe to our YouTube channel and LinkedIn community page, the Coaching Outdoor Podcast.
Thanks so much in advance for your support.